Good morning, everybody. As Gal mentioned, my name is Stephen O'Reilly. I work with Enterprise Ireland and I'm with the National Support Network here for Horizon 2020. I'm primarily involved on the ICT side, so I sit on the programme committee in Brussels for ICT and for FET, and I'm also a national contact point for both areas as well. I've quite a lot of slides here this morning, but we'll get through them fairly quickly. Feel free to interrupt at any stage if you have any questions or anything like that, and we can deal with them as we go through it. First thing I need to mention is this disclaimer up here. Okay, the work programs, the calls, the rules of Horizon 2020 are constantly changing. Okay, there's constantly updates to the various documents and so on. So when you're getting involved in a proposal, when you're submitting a proposal to a call, please do make sure you have the most up-to-date documents from the call webpage. Okay, and from the submission system itself, because if you're working from a previous version of a document, there may be some inaccurate information in there, and things like call dates and so on might change over time. So it's very important that you go onto the participant portal, which I have the web link here for, and that you go through the most up-to-date documents that are available. Just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start with a general introduction to Horizon 2020, go through some of the main rules of participation. As you can imagine, there's a huge amount of rules and background documentation on this. It wouldn't be possible to cover all of them in a short session like this, but we'll go through the main ones. And then I'm briefly going to go through future emerging technologies, and the various opportunities for ICT across the programme. Okay? And I'll also guide you to other parts of the programme where you may find other non-ICT related opportunities. A couple of slides on how to find partners, how to find the various opportunities across the programme, and then making sense of the work programmes, and show you how to read these work programmes and find the information that you really need to find. Just before I progress onto the general introduction to Horizon, can I just check how many people here have actually worked on framework programs, framework projects previously? So maybe about half of you, so you'll have some familiarity with it. And as I said, look, if there's any questions as we go through, please feel free to interrupt. So Horizon 2020, as you're probably aware, is the latest in the European Commission's framework programs for R&D. If we were to follow the previous numbering scheme, this would be Framework Programme 8. Okay? But it's not business as usual. It incorporates what was the Framework Programme, FP7. It also incorporates the European Institutes of Technology, and it incorporates a separate programme that used to exist previously called the CIP programme, Competitiveness and Innovation Programme. Now that Competitiveness and Innovation Programme had an ICT strand called ICT PSP. It was ICT Policy Support Programme, and the main focus of that was really looking at piloting and demonstrating of results that had been developed in previous research projects. Okay, so they've all been rolled up into this new large program called Horizon 2020. Some of the things that have changed as well coming from the previous programs is that all parts of the program now work with a 2-year work program. So at the start of 2014, we had a view of what was coming for the next 2 years. So the first work programs cover 2014-2015. Work is going to begin later this summer on drafting out the work programs covering 2016-2017 and so on. Okay. I suppose one of the other things to bear in mind is that the main focus of this Horizon program, one of the main objectives of this program is to kickstart the European economy again. So it's all about jobs, it's all about getting product to market. It's been recognised in the past that Europe has been very good at doing research, but has been very poor in actually translating the results of that research into something in the marketplace. Okay. So you may have heard mention of this valley of debt, where we've done some very good research, very good at filing patents, very good at publications, but actually translating that research then into product on the shelf has been very poor when we compare it to, say, for example, the States. This new program, there's essentially 3 pillars involved. We've got a pillar on excellent science, which is more focusing on basic research. We've got a pillar on industrial leadership, and we've got a pillar on societal challenges. And the breakdown of those areas, excellent science, it's not working on the screen. Excellent science, there's 3 main parts to excellent science basically. We've got the European Research Council, which we had in FP7, which is also referred to as the IDEAS programme. And this is targeting principal investigators. So it's funding for a standalone principal investigator. There's early stage programs, and there's more developed programs for researchers that are later in or further into their career as a researcher. Future and emerging technologies is the second area here. This is something that in previous programs resided under the ICT pillar. So one of the big changes that we have going from FP7 into Horizon is that future and emerging technologies is now no longer just ICT focused. It covers all areas of the program. It's any scientific or engineering discipline. And again, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. And then we've also got the Marie Curie program, which is really focusing in on the career development of researchers. There's one particular aspect of that program called RISE, which can have industry academia partnerships. And under that part of the program, IBM here could bring in researchers from research organizations across Europe and further afield, and have them placed physically here to work on projects for a year or more. Okay, so again, that's something of interest. In the industrial technologies area, we have a number of different parts to this program. ICT is the biggest part of it. And I'll touch on the ICT topics later in the presentation. We have a second area focusing on nanotechnologies, materials, production technologies, and biotechnology. And then we have an area focusing in on space as well. Okay. And then the third pillar, societal challenges. There are 7 different societal challenges within Horizon 2020. And again, this is a change from what we had previously. In FP7, we had a number of different thematic areas. Some of those thematic areas have become societal challenges. So for example, we had energy and transport as 2 thematic areas in FP7, and here they are in Horizon as standalone thematic areas, standalone societal challenges, I should say. One of the differences we see here is that in FP7, everything ICT related was part of the ICT work program. Okay? Whereas as we move into Horizon, the societal challenge aspects of ICT have moved out of the ICT area itself and moved into each of the societal challenge areas. So things like ICT for energy, ICT for transport, ICT for health, previously resided in the ICT part of the program. Now they're in the individual parts of the societal challenges. So that's one of the big changes that we see as well in this new program. So each of the areas here that you can see will all have standalone work programs. So standalone 2-year work programs. And something that you should be doing here as an organization is making sure you have up-to-date copies of all of those work programs and scan through the table of contents of each one, so you can see the different areas that are being looked at and see, look, which areas might be of interest to IBM here. Okay. I'm going to show you some different ways of looking for opportunities later on in the presentation, but certainly, one of the most straightforward things you can do with identifying opportunities is just make sure you have the 7 societal challenge work programs, make sure you have the ICT work program, make sure you have the FET work program, and just scan through the table of contents of each one. Okay, and it should be fairly obvious from the table of contents which topics might be of interest. Okay. The budget for the program, it's approaching 80 billion, and you can see the breakdown there across the different areas. I won't dwell on that. Moving on to some of the rules of participation, some of the rules in the program, and there are some significant changes in Horizon from what we had in FP7. Okay. First of all, of projects. that we have is different, okay? And the language has changed here as well. We have what the Commission calls actions, okay? So when they say action, what they mean is project, okay? We've got research and innovation actions, and we've got innovation actions. Now, in the previous programs, we would have used language like STREPs and integrated projects, okay? So, and I'll go through each of these in turn, but basically research and innovation actions are the closest thing that we have to what were STREPs and integrated projects in FP7, okay? We've got coordination and support actions, which is a continuation from FP7. We've got the SME instrument, which is a brand new type of project. It's only for SMEs, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going to mention it in the presentation here, just so you're aware of it. We've got ERANETs, we've got pre-commercial procurement actions, and we've got public procurement of innovative solutions. Okay, and I'll go through each of those in turn. Research and innovation actions and innovation actions are probably the most common types of project that you'll see in the program. And again, what I've done here is I've copied the official text from the definition of what the different types of projects are, so you can see exactly what the Commission is expecting when they talk about research and innovation actions. And to quote the text, it's an action primarily consisting of activities aiming to establish new knowledge and or to explore the feasibility of a new or improved technology, product, process, service or solution. Okay. It may include basic and applied research, technology development and integration, testing and validation on a small scale prototype in a laboratory or simulated environment. So this is, early stage research. If you're looking at technology readiness levels, we're probably looking at up to level 3, 4, possibly up even to 5. Limited demonstration activities. They're not looking for large scale demonstrations within this, okay? It's more lab prototypes, lab scale demonstrations is what they're looking for within this type of project. The minimum eligibility criteria, 3 independent partners in 3 different countries. Okay. Now, in reality, most projects will be bigger than that, but they're the minimum requirement you must have. And the funding rate for this type of project is 100% funding for all types of organisation, whether you're a large multinational, a small SME, or a university. Doesn't make any difference. Everybody gets 100% funding. The second type of project we have is called an innovation action. And this is a much closer to market type of activity. And the types of activities that can be included in it are prototyping, testing, demonstrating, piloting, large-scale product validation, and market replication. It has very limited research involved in the traditional sense of research, okay? So it's really about, you're nearly coming from a lab-type research prototype and bringing it through the next few levels of the technology readiness scale, okay? The funding rate here is 70% for commercial organisations, so companies, SMEs, multinationals and so on, 70% funding, but public bodies, so the research institutes, the colleges, the universities can avail of 100% funding in this particular case. The involvement of industry in this type of project is critical. Okay, there is no way a project here will get funded that has 5 academic partners and no industry partners. It's just not going to fly. Okay, so I would say at least, a general rule of thumb that I would use: make sure at least 50% of the partners, if not more, are industry partners within this type of an activity. And again, as I said, 70% funding is what we have here. And just to go into the funding model a little bit, because this again is something that is different to what we had in previous programs. Those of you involved in FP7 projects will be aware of 50% funding for research and development, 50% funding for demonstration for IBM, 75% funding for research organisations, 100% funding for management activities, coordination activities and so on. There's a whole plethora of different rates and so on. When it comes to indirect costs or overheads, there's a whole lot of different approaches to that as well within FP7. But in Horizon, they've simplified the different funding rates and so on. There is one single rate of overhead support within this program. It's a flat rate of 25%, okay, for everybody, irrespective of multinational SME college. Everybody takes 25% of their direct cost as an overhead, and then that total eligible cost is funded at either 100% or 70%, depending on which type of project you're in. The SME instrument, as I mentioned, is something that's brand new for Horizon. It's only for SMEs, but the reason that it might be of interest here is that, you know, maybe there is some IP, maybe there's some technology here within IBM that maybe IBM isn't interested in bringing further itself, but might be interested in licensing out to an SME. And you know, this particular program would enable that SME to submit for some funding to further develop the technology. There's essentially 3 phases to the program, to this new instrument. Phase 1 is basically a feasibility study, €50,000 lump sum for a study of maybe up to 6 months. Phase 2 is an innovation action, 70% funding for the SMEs, and it's demonstration, market replication, that type of stuff. And then phase 3 doesn't give any direct funding to the SMEs themselves, but it puts in place things like mentoring, coaching, business angels, which will help the SMEs that are involved in phase 1 or phase 2 of this new instrument. A company can go in at phase 1 if they wish, or they can go straight into a phase 2 if they wish. Phase 2 is up to $2.5 million for a project that could be up to 2 years in duration. And again, this could be for a single standalone SME, or it can be for a network or a consortium of SMEs. And again, you know, if it was a piece of IP, say, that had been developed here at a research level and was being transferred out into an SME, piece of IP that IBM is not interested in commercializing, you know, the feasibility part of this instrument could be used to scope out, you know, the freedom to operate and the competing IPR landscape out there as well. Okay, so something to be aware of. It's a continuously open topic with 3-month rolling deadlines. Okay, the only way non-SMEs can participate directly in this part of the program is via subcontract. Okay, so an SME could potentially subcontract some bits of work to colleges or to larger companies. Fast track to innovation, again, is something new that we have. It's not available at the moment. It's something that's going to come on stream later in 2015. It's innovation actions. It's going to be a continuously open call, small projects, maximum of 5 partners. The aspiration here is that they'll have quick turnaround evaluations and so on. They want to have projects up and running within 5 months of the various deadlines that they're going to put in place. The maximum grant is going to be $3 million, and there are rules here as regards the makeup of the consortium and the percentage of funding that can go to industry partners. Okay, so I think it's a minimum of 60% of the funding has to go to industry. If you have 3 or 4 partners, at least 2 of them have to be industry, be they large companies or SMEs. If you have 5 partners, at least 3 of them have to be industry partners. Okay, this is something that will be launched probably around the middle of next year. It's not going to reside within the different work programs. It's going to be taken out as a standalone part of the program and will have its own little work program. It's bottom up, any technology, any focus area. And there's going to be 200 million available for this in 2015 and 2016. Okay, so, you know, if you're averaging 2 million a project, they're going to fund 100 projects. Again, this is something that's been launched in a pilot phase. It'll run for 2015, 2016. I think they'll take a step back then in 2017 and review this part of the program, see is it working. If they're happy with it, they'll run it again then in 2018, 2019, 2020. Okay, so something brand new. There's not a lot of information on it at the moment, but it's something to keep an eye out for in future if you're looking to do a relatively small collaborative project. Pre-commercial procurement and public procurement of innovative solutions. This is not something for the general research community. What the Commission is targeting here are the procurement agencies across Europe. They're trying to encourage these procurement agencies to come together, agencies that would have joint requirements, similar requirements. They would submit a proposal for whatever topic they're calling for a PCP for. The proposals that are successful and go on to be funded will come together and define a call for tender amongst themselves. That will be launched at a European level and even wider, actually, in fact. And it's then that the general companies, academics, researchers can reply with a bid for that call for tender. Okay. It's something that we've seen in the latter years of FP7, primarily in the ICT area. I should mention that we did have, I think there were 3 or 4 different topics in the ICT call that just closed back in April. 3 or 4 topics looking for this, calling for this pre-commercial procurement action. There were no proposals submitted for any of them. Okay. So I think while the thinking behind this is good, I think the Commission is probably going about it in the wrong way. And it's something that needs to be, there needs to be a little bit of thinking about this, and maybe they need to come at it from a different direction. But again, just to be aware of it, they're targeting the procurement agencies. So, you know, groups like the HSE, for example, here in Ireland, and similar groups across Europe to come together to do a joint tender, a joint call for tender. Conditions for participation, and again, these are the general conditions, okay, and they may change from topic to topic, and that's why I said at the start, please do make sure you have the most up-to-date work programs and so on. If you're submitting for a specific topic in a specific call, go into the online submission system, register your proposal on the system, and then download the actual work program and the actual templates from that submission system. Okay. One example I want to give you of how these things can change. We had a large number of topics in the first ICT call, which had a deadline back in April. The general rule as regards proposal length for Part B of a research and innovation action was 70 pages. Okay. But we had one particular topic, which was in the FIRE area, Future Internet Research Experimentation, where that page limit was actually increased to 100. Okay, and you know that information wasn't generally available. It was only when you went into the detail on the submission system that you discovered you had an extra 30 pages to play with if you so wished. Okay, so again, it's something to bear in mind, and make sure you have the most up-to-date information on that. The minimum conditions for participation generally: 3 independent partners, 3 independent entities, 3 different countries. Okay. For the SME instrument and for coordination and support actions, this can be a single entity. You don't need to have partners. And then, as I said, additional conditions may be set out in the various work programs for the different topics. Eligibility for funding, well, basically any legal entity can apply for funding, as long as they're established in a member state or an associated country. So we have the 28 member states. I think we have about 11 associated countries, Norway, Israel, and so on, who can participate on the exact same basis as any of the member states within Europe. Okay. There's a big list of third countries that's available, which can receive funding and can participate in the program as well, as long as you meet the eligibility criteria of 3 independent partners from 3 member states or associated countries to start with. Once you've met that, there's a whole list of countries where you can bring in partners from those countries and they can participate and get funding. And then there's a final list of partners, of countries, the likes of the States, Canada, Australia, and Switzerland actually is one of them at the moment, where generally they can participate, but you really need to justify their inclusion, and ordinarily they will not get funded. Okay, so you need a very, very strong argument for them to get funded within the programme. And you need to be able to say something down the lines of what this partner brings to this project is something that is not available across Europe, and it brings real added value to this project. Okay, so that's the type of argument that you need to have to bring in partners from those countries. We have plenty of examples where, for example, partners from the States and so on have got funded in the past. But again, we really do need a strong argument for it. The evaluation of proposals, again, it is quite similar to what we had in FP7. There are 3 main evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. And each is evaluated on its own merit. It's marked out of 5. Generally, you have to score 3 out of 5 in each area, and generally you will have to get 10 out of 15 overall as a minimum to be eligible for funding. In some parts of the programs, those thresholds can be a bit higher, okay? But again, they will be laid out in the different parts of the program. In ICT, for the most part, everything is a single stage submission, but you'll see in other parts of the program where they have a 2-stage submission system. So you put in a short pre-proposal to start with, and a certain number of those then are invited back to do a full proposal. Okay. In terms of the selection criteria, once all of the evaluations have been done and the Commission comes up with a short list of projects that it wants to fund, Commission will then look at the participants in each of those consortia. They will look at the operational capacity, and they will look at the financial capacity of each of those partners. And while I wouldn't expect there would be an issue for IBM here, for example, in a lot of small SMEs, this can be an issue, because a lot of the companies, a lot of the SMEs participating in the program, they might have 3, 4, 5 people. They're small companies. So, obviously the Commission is going to be a little bit hesitant in signing a 3-year contract where that particular partner is going to be getting $500,000 or more in a project, particularly as quite a sizable chunk of the funding is upfront funding at the start of the project. So they will look at the operational capacity, and they will look at the financial capacity of each of the participants in the program. Grant preparation and signature. Again, this is something new for Horizon 2020. The aspiration is that from the time the call closes to the time the grant is signed will be 8 months maximum. Okay. Now, obviously, we're still going through the evaluation process for the first calls, so whether this can be met with or not, we don't know. We'll see as we go along. Come September, we'll have a good idea how things are going with this. 8 months from call closing to grant signing, and they have further subdivided that into 5 months for the evaluation piece and 3 months for the grant preparation piece. For those of you who might have been involved in some of the early calls, there's rumours starting to fly around the place at the moment about how different proposals did. If we look at the first ICT call, which closed on the 21st of April, I think it was, most of the evaluations have been completed at this stage. In fact, I think this week marks the end of the panel sessions in Brussels. So, the Commission has a fair idea of what they're going to do at this stage. But because of this 5 months and 3 months breakdown, we're not going to get results for that until next September. Okay? And as you can imagine, rumours are only going to increase between now and then. What we've been told is that for the first ICT call, the committee will be informed on the 22nd of September, and the coordinators will be informed on the 23rd of September. Okay? Now, if we're fighting this 5 months and 3 months subdivision, if we can get rid of this, well then we'll get the results earlier. Okay? But the reason behind it is the Commission want to get the full 8 months to get to the signed grants. Audit certificates, again, this is something that has been changed a little bit since FP7. You will now only need an audit certificate if you exceed 325,000 in a grant, in a particular project, and only at the end of the project will the audit cert be required, whereas previously, every time you hit the limit, you had to do an audit cert with your cost statement. So, if you were in a 3-year project, and you drew down over 325 each year, you had to do 3 audit certs. In this case, you will only have to do 1 at the end of the project. Ex post audits, this is where the Commission can come in at any stage up to 2 years after the end of the project, after the final payment has been made, and carry out an audit themselves. Okay. The guarantee fund is something we had in FP7 as well. I don't think anything has changed with it. Basically what this is, it's a fund that has been put in place by the Commission to cover the cost of defaulting partners in a project. So what happens with this is, when you get your upfront payment, the Commission takes 5% of your budget from that upfront payment, sticks it into an investment account, it generates interest, and that interest will be sufficient to cover the cost of any defaulting partners in a project. So, say for example, a company goes bust in the middle of the project, obviously money is going to be lost. This interest generated will help to cover the cost of that. The 5% will be returned at the end of the project. Worst case, from a company perspective, is you only get 4% of the 5% back if the interest generated wasn't enough to cover the cost of defaulting partners. This is applied on a program level, okay, not a project by project level. So even though your project may be okay and running smoothly, you know, you as a company, you're still open to losing 1% of the 5 if at a program level there's an issue. Okay. IPR. Again, just quickly to go through some of the main points on IPR. Ownership, whoever generates the results will own them. Okay? And in most cases it's quite clear who has generated the results because of the nature of these projects where each partner has its role. If there is an argument to be made for joint ownership, well then that's fine as well. You know, foreground can be jointly owned. The Commission does expect partners to protect results that are of commercial or industrial value. Okay? And if they're not protected, if you have something which the Commission deems to be commercializable and you don't protect it, the Commission can decide to come in and protect it itself. Exploitation, obviously, you know, the Commission doesn't want to see the results of these projects sitting up on a shelf. They want to see them generating economic activity beyond the project. So, you know, you are expected to exploit them, and they have this best efforts obligation, is how they refer to it. There is possibility to transfer and exclusive licenses to third countries and so on, and to third parties as well. And one of the new things within Horizon now as well is this open access to publications. Okay, so there's a big push on that. All publications should be open access. Yeah.
The major publishers somehow
I think most of the major publishers have conditions in there where if you pay a certain fee, then they make it open access, or they make it open access after a certain period of time. Okay, but there's plenty of background information on this. If you want to go into it further, I can get you some material on it. And again, they would be seen as an eligible cost as well. Okay, but I think, you know, obviously, you know, the major publishers have some issues with this, but I think over time we'll see it sorted out. And you know, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's a work in progress. Okay. Access rights, again, it's something very similar to what we had before. If you bring background into a project, that's your background, it remains your background, and you will generally make it freely available for the purposes of carrying out the project. But if it's people want access to that background right for exploitation in order to exploit their own foreground, which might be dependent on your background, well then, you know, that's under terms and conditions to be agreed. And that will all be trashed out in the consortium agreement. Again, similarly with foreground, I should mention, if you develop foreground within the project, you generally make it freely available for the purposes of doing the project. If the partners want access to it outside of the project for commercial use, well then that's under terms and conditions to be agreed as well. So I'm going to quickly move on and go through some of the different parts of the program now. Future and emerging technologies is the first area I want to touch on. And this basically is divided into 3 different strands. We've got FET Open, FET Proactive, and FET Flagships. FET Open is a continuously open call, bottom up. Previously it was ICT focused, now it's no longer just ICT, it's any discipline. They're really interested in multidisciplinary projects here. Continuously open call with deadlines every 6 months or so. Okay. Just in excess of 1 billion is going to be spent on FET Open projects over the course of Horizon 2020. And again, typically these will be minimum 3 partners, 3 countries. And typically they're in the region of maybe 2 to 4 million in funding. Okay. There'll be research and innovation actions, which will be 100% funded, and there's also a call for some coordination and support actions. The type of language they use around FET Open in terms of the hands-on research projects, they talk about long-term vision, they talk about breakthrough science and technology targets, foundational, novel, high risk, interdisciplinary. They're looking for new approaches to problem solving here. They're looking for, it's not the next iteration of an established line of research. This is kind of laying the foundations for new directions in research, new focuses of research. Again, research and innovation actions, 100% funding, grants in the region of 2 to 4 million is what they're looking for. The first deadline is at the end of September. And again, it looks like we're going to have deadlines every 6 months after that. And the budget for the first tranche of deadlines here is 154 million. We also have some coordination and support actions. Now, unlike the research and innovation actions, the CSAs are not continuously open. There's one deadline this year in September, and there's another deadline next year in September. So if we look at this year's September deadline, we have 6 different areas that they're looking for coordination and support actions. The first is FET Observatory, which is really about trying to identify new opportunities within FET, new focus areas within FET. We have FET Communication, which is about disseminating the results of ongoing FET Open projects. We've got FET Exchange, which is again looking at structuring an emerging FET relevant topic and building a community around it. The FET Conference is looking for somebody to put together the next iteration of the FET conferences that have been running for the last few years. FET Prizes is trying to identify suitable areas in which the Commission could come up with a prize system in FET. And then finally we have FET Impact, which is a CSA to assess the direct and indirect impacts of the FET program. Okay, you can see the breakdown here. I've just taken some of the information from the work program. A number of these areas, A, B, D, E, and F, they're going to fund one project in each of those. The budget across all 6 is 3 million, and you can see the further breakdown there. As a CSA, they're 100% funded. For the most part, it's the academic groups tend to go for this, but we do see industry participate as well. FET Open 3 are the coordination and support actions for the deadline in September of next year. And there's just 2 areas there, FET Exchange and FET Take-Up. FET Proactive is the second pillar within FET. And this is a more focused area than FET Open. So we have 3 topics in this first work program: global system science, knowing, doing, being, and quantum simulation. The deadline has passed for these. It was back on the 1st of April. There was a budget of 35 million across all 3 areas. There's an open consultation going on at the moment to try and identify suitable FET Proactive topics in the next work program. Okay. So I won't say any more about that. In terms of the evaluations, you'll see the thresholds are different here. So for excellence, you need to get a minimum of 4 out of 5. okay, as opposed to the more generic 3 out of 5, which is across most of the program. And you also need to get 3.5 out of 5 for impact. You'll see excellence here as well carries a 60% weighting. We've also got an area in FET. It's really a FET proactive area, but it's in the area of high performance computing. And the Commission have launched this as what they call a public-private partnership. So we have this group which has come together focused on high performance computing. They've come up with a strategic research agenda, and much of that research agenda is fitting into the call. The budget, we've got a couple of topics in there. FET HPC 1 is looking at the core technologies around high performance computing. 94 million available for that. And as you can see, it's divided into 4 different areas here. Core technologies and architectures, programming methodologies, APIs, and new mathematical and algorithmic approaches. The bulk of the funding is going for the first bullet point, the core technologies and architectures. And then we've got FET HPC 2, which is looking at the ecosystem development. This is looking for coordination and support action. So it's about building up the research community and linking them together, all of the relevant partners for HPC ecosystem. The deadline for both of these topics is on the 25th of November this year. You may have heard mention of FET flagships. This is the final area in FET. And this goes back to around the middle of FP7. The Commission wanted to launch these big, innovative flagship projects. They weren't quite sure what they should focus on, what were the areas that they should focus on. So they launched a call for pilot proposals that would try and flesh out what a flagship might be. That call was back in July of 2010. They selected 6 pilot projects to scope out what a FET flagship might look like, what the focus would be, how it might be funded. And then at the end of that pilot phase, they selected 2 projects to be launched as a standalone flagship. And the 2 projects that were launched were a project called Graphene, and as the name suggests, it's looking into all the possibilities around graphene, and Human Brain Project. So they were launched in October of last year. They got 54 million each, and that's to get them through a 30-month ramp-up period. And later next year, there'll be a further call, I think in the region of 90 million for each of the 2 flagships to continue over the next 2.5 years or so again. ICT in societal challenges. And again, I'm just going to focus in on the ICT opportunities here. As I said, there are lots of opportunities across the different parts of the program. The first area we have is health. And the Commission have prepared quite a useful guide highlighting all of the different ICT opportunities across, not just in the ICT area, but across the societal challenges as well. And I've got a few copies of this here if people want to take one later. So in terms of health, we've got advanced active and healthy aging, we've got integrated, sustainable and citizen-centred care, and we've got improving health informatics. Okay, so very ICT focused topics, but within the health societal challenge area. The second area is food security, sustainable agriculture and forestry, and the marine. There are no ICT specific topics within that program at the moment, but it's expected there will be in future work programs. And when I say ICT related topics, what I mean by that are the topics that come under the remit of the ICT Directorate in the Commission. Okay, there may be some other topics in there that look like ICT, but because they don't come under the remit of the ICT Directorate, they're not mentioned here. And one example of that would be robotics. Okay, so within Societal Challenge 2, there is a call that looks for the use, that calls for, there is a topic that calls for robotics for marine type applications, okay? But it doesn't come under the remit of the ICT guys, so you won't see it mentioned in here. And that's another reason why you should look at the table of contents for each of the societal challenge areas and just make sure you're not missing any of the opportunities. In the energy efficiency area, we've got ICT for energy efficiency, we've got ICT for competitive low carbon economy, and we've also got smart cities and communities. And the smart cities and communities, in a sense, it's a follow-on to what was the energy efficient buildings area within FP7. In the transport area, we've got ICT for mobility for growth, and we've also got green vehicles, so electric cars and so on. The Challenge 5 area is on climate action and environment, and there are two ICT focused topics within that: ICT for waste management and ICT for water management. In Societal Challenge 6, inclusive, innovative and reflective societies, we've got access to and the exploitation of cultural assets. So in FP7 we had topics on ICT for digital cultural heritage. So this is in effect as a continuation of that. We've also got a topic looking at the role of ICT in modernising the public sector, and we've got ICT for learning and inclusion. And then finally, the final area within the societal challenge, the security area, we've got digital security, cyber security, privacy and trust. Okay. Again, the guide is here. I've given the link if you want to download a soft copy of it. Well worth having as a reference document. And each of the, and I'll show you before the end of the presentation how to go through each of the different work programs to identify, you know, what topics are relevant and where to find the details of the call and so on. ICT in the industrial technologies area, a number of different areas within ICT. We've got components and systems, we've got advanced computing, we've got future internet, content and information management, robotics, and then the two key enabling technologies of micro and nanoelectronics and photonics. And then there's a number of cross-cutting activities as well, things like the Internet of Things, human-centric digital age, and cyber security. Each of these areas is divided up into a number of different topics, and again, it's all clear within the work program. Where the inputs have come from, well, we have a number of different European technology platforms, we've got joint technology initiatives. A lot of these areas here will come up with their strategic research agendas. There's an opportunity to get involved with the various platforms, to get on their working groups and to help shape the research agendas for the different areas. And a lot of those strategic research agendas end up getting cut and pasted into the work programs. So in terms of how can you influence future work programs, well, this is an obvious first step. Get involved with the relevant technology platforms. And again, I can provide details on the different platforms that are relevant to ICT. The first ICT related calls, just to give you a feel for the level of participation. In the Factories of the Future call, there were a few ICT topics. The budget was 34 million and there were 55 proposals. Given the requested budgets of those 55 proposals, the expected success rate is going to be 14.8%. Okay, which is lower than what we had previously in Factories of the Future. So it's looking like everything is going to be that little bit more competitive this time around. The first ICT call itself, the first main ICT call, which had a budget of the region of 650 million, closed in the middle of April, and there were over 1,600 proposals submitted for that. And again, looking at the requested contributions and looking at the available budget, the hit rate is going to be in the region of 12%, okay, which is again a little bit lower. And finally, we had an EU-Japan call, which was quite a small call, only 6 million was available there, 23 proposals, looking at a hit rate of 17.5% there. But if we look at the main call, the ICT call 1, 650 million, if we compare that to the ICT calls of FP7, what I've given here are the success rates across all the different calls in FP7, starting with call 1 back in 2007. finishing up with call 11, which would have been the end of 2012, I guess. You can see the various hit rates there. You know, I think the lowest is about 9% for call 3. The highest is 20% for call 4. So looking at this first horizon call, 12% is the expected hit rate. So it's a little bit lower than what we've had previously. Again, just for information, this is the breakdown of the number of proposals for the different types of instrument for the different topics in the first ICT call. Again, there's no point in dwelling on these. You can go through them at your leisure. If you were involved with one of these topics, you'll get an idea from this graph what the level of competition is going to be. And interestingly, as I said, there were no proposals for pre-commercial procurement submitted. Future ICT calls, we have a call later this year focusing on 5G. Deadline is on the 25th of November. 125 million available for advanced 5G network infrastructures for the future internet. We have a coordinated call with Brazil coming up later. It'll open in December. The deadline will be in April next year. 3 topics: cloud computing, high performance computing, and future internet experimental platforms. The way these coordinated calls work is that you build your consortium at a European level, but you also have partners from Brazil. The Brazilian partners will be funded by the Brazilian funding agencies. The European partners will be funded from the Commission. And there are specific rules in place around the Brazil side of the call as well. But it's one single collaborative proposal is what is submitted here. And the next, I suppose, large ICT call is going to be ICT call 2. That will be published in October. But again, look, we have the work program. All of the topics are there in the work program. You can see exactly what's coming up. The deadline is the 14th of April next year. The overall budget is 560 million. And I've just given a list of the topics here. Okay, you can go through them at your leisure. I won't go through each of the topics. But this will give you a feel for what the opportunities will be for April of next year. And again, a second page of topics here to do with the same call. So I just want to move on and maybe talk a little bit about finding partners and identifying the relevant opportunities. But maybe before I do that, are there any particular questions about the structure of the program, the rules of the program? You're all happy with that? Okay? Yep, okay. So finding partners. The first thing I always say to people is start with your existing contacts. Have you been in projects before yourself? Who are the partners in those projects? Who are the partners you got on well with and that you would like to go back into projects with as well? Who are the contacts that you have that may have been involved in projects but you haven't collaborated with them? You know, maybe there's an opportunity to start collaborating with them. And again, look at IBM as a whole. Okay, I think IBM across Europe has been involved in around 100 FP7 ICT projects. That's a lot of projects. That's a lot of different partners. You know, you don't have to be collaborating with all of them, but if you can go through them and identify the key 10, 12, 15 partners that you should be collaborating with on an ongoing basis. I think there's a lot to be gained from looking at the projects. Look at what IBM Switzerland is doing. Look at what IBM Israel is doing. Look at all the projects they're in. Look at who they're collaborating with. You know, and you know, while there may be a sense of us and them type of thing, that you know, the different divisions within IBM possibly are competing with each other, but you know, I would argue that you should be collaborating with each other for the greater good. Okay. You know, if Israel are able to pull you into a project, maybe you can pull them into a project at a later stage. You need to be collaborating. You know, there's no point in reinventing the wheel here. You know, there are some very good people within IBM across Europe who know how to play this game and who know how to be successful, and you need to be, benefiting from their experience. Look at the existing projects that have been funded. So look at the areas you're interested in. Look at smart cities, for example. The precursor to that was energy efficient buildings. We've had at least 3 calls on energy efficient buildings in FP7 back through the years. And there's a tranche of projects up and running in each of those areas. So, you should be looking at, you should be aware of what projects have been funded in the past, who's involved with them, and who are the partners within those projects that, you might be interested in participating with. I have some links here, and we can go through some of these in a while if time allows. But I'll keep going for now. Attend the brokerage events organised by the Commission. Attend the information events organised by the Commission. The next big event that we have coming up is the ICT Proposals Day, which is going to happen in Florence on the 9th and 10th of October. Okay? This will cover all ICT related topics that will be coming up in the next calls. There'll be people from the Commission there. There'll be researchers, there'll be companies looking for opportunities, looking for partners. So again, well worth going to those types of events. Idealist is a network of the various national contact points across Europe. And one of the things that Idealist does is it operates a partner search service. So if you have a particular idea for a particular topic, and if you don't have the right partners for your consortium, you can publish your idea on the Idealist portal, and that gets published on a European scale, and you can try and find partners that way. And again, I suppose the final thing I'll say in terms of finding partners, talk to the relevant NCP. Whether it's me in ICT, or whether it's somebody in transport, or somebody in energy. I've given the link here for where you'll find contact details for the complete national support network here in Ireland. So, you've got telephone numbers, email addresses, and, chase people up. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Don't be afraid to ring them. If there's something we can do to support researchers here in Ireland getting involved in the programme, certainly we will. We have access to lots of information. We know what projects were successful previously. We know what researchers were successful previously. And, certainly, if there's merit in sitting down and going through a batch of results or a batch of projects and helping in any way we can, certainly we will do that. Finding the opportunities. Again, look, the participant portal is where it's all at. This is where all of the calls are. It's where all the work programs are. It's where all the background supporting documentation can be found. Okay. Idealist, again, as I mentioned, runs the partner search service. But we have, it's a network of national contact points, and maybe you don't want to publish your idea, but you're looking for a particular type of partner. I can talk to my counterparts across Europe on a one-to-one level and say, look, I have a group looking for a company with this expertise, with this capability, can you help? They don't want to publish their idea, but this is what they're looking for. And, we can work on that level. The Opportunity Finder is something which has been put together by EU Research in Switzerland. You can go into this website. You can search for funded projects and so on. You can get all of the work programs. It basically pulls a lot of information from the Commission's participant portal. And in some senses, it's actually maybe an easier website to work on. Okay, so have a look at that. One thing I should warn you about in both the participant portal and subsequently this Opportunity Finder, because the Opportunity Finder pulls this data from the participant portal. If you go onto the participant portal and look for the ICT call for next year, for some reason it's not up there. Okay. The Commission hasn't put it up yet, even though there's a button there where you can say, look, search for forthcoming calls. So just because you don't find something on the system today doesn't mean you should forget about it. You need to go back to the portal on a regular basis and make sure you're aware of all the different opportunities. I suppose the final section I wanted to talk about briefly was how to make sense of the work programme. Okay, and if you look at, this is just an extract from the table of contents within the energy work programme. And I've just zoned in there on smart cities and communities. So I see this as a topic that IBM Research here will have an active interest in. Okay, so you can see as you go through the table of contents, a topic catches your eye. You then go in and look at the conditions for this call. Okay, so when you go into page 91 then of this document, it'll give you a breakdown of the deadlines, the budgets, and so on. And that's the type of information you need to look at. The work program itself is probably in excess of 100 pages. You know, I wouldn't for 1 minute advocate that you read these work programs from start to finish, right? Go through the table of contents, tick the topics that you think might be of interest, and then go and look at the conditions for the call for that topic. So, I mean, the way they're structured, we have a call Smart Cities and Communities. That lists the different topics in Smart Cities and Communities, and then at the end of it we have a section on conditions for the Smart Cities and Communities call. Okay, and all of the work programs are similarly structured. So that's, you know, that's the best way to go about them. Some useful documents that are up on the portal: the Model Grant Agreement. Okay, this basically replaces what was the rules of participation and so on. It's quite a hefty document, 490 pages. Okay, again, I'm not advocating that anybody reads it. I certainly haven't read it, but I have it as a reference. Okay, so something crops up, you want to know about foreground or background or you know, dissemination or anything like that, go to the relevant clause in the Model Grant Agreement and see exactly what is required there. There's a lot of explanations in there around all the different options that you can have. In terms of consortium agreements, and again, you know, consortium must have a consortium agreement in order to lay down the ground rules for access rights and all this kind of stuff. Effectively, there are two main models for the consortium agreement. We've got the DESCA model, which seems to be a little bit more favoured by academia, and then we've got the Digital Europe model. And again, I've given the links here for both of those. Digital Europe, I suppose, is probably a little bit more favoured by industry. It's up to yourselves which one you use, but bottom line is the consortium has to agree. Okay, whether it's the DESCA model, whether it's the Digital Europe model, it'll probably change from project to project. You should be aware of both of them. Okay, and then finally, there's some other reference documents there as well in this final website I've given you. I think that's pretty much it in terms of the slides. I should mention we actually have two NCPs focusing on ICT. There's myself and I have a colleague in Shannon as well, Gerard Kennedy. Feel free to contact either of us, or in fact anyone in the Horizon National Support Network here in Ireland. One of the things I was thinking of doing here as well was maybe going through some of the websites, but you know, we can take it or leave it as people wish. If there's specific parts of it that people want to look at. One interesting one actually is the projects. Let me see, will this work? I'm going to put up this one.
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it on the screen as well. Any questions while we're trying to get this? Okay.
Thanks very much for that background.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very useful. So I just had a question, maybe to get your perspective on what happens when multidisciplinary type projects. For example, if you're trying to do something in transport, you choose to answer a call from the ICT with the FP7 frame. I mean, we found that some of the reviewers tended to be heavy from the domain that kind of sponsor the call.
Yes.
Do you have any insights for us to go after calls, let's say, in transport?
Well, again, I mean, that will boil down to where is the opportunity? You know, it's where do you best address the scope of the topic? And, you know, if it's a transport project, or if it's a transport topic, transport related topic, it's probably the transport work program, so probably the transport call. We do have ICT related topics in transport, whereas, you know, what you want to do might not sit with any of the ICT topics in ICT. So it comes down to the scope of what they're looking for. And, you know, if you're not hitting that scope 100%, forget about it, you know, because you can't half address the scope because it's just not going to get through. It's going to be too competitive. If we look at, say, health as an example, right, because it's something that I've been talking to a few project officers about, we have some ICT for health topics, and they have told us they will actually be using, as part of the evaluation process, they'll be using medical doctors to help evaluate. So now they'll also have people from the ICT background, but they will bring in people from the medical background as well to do the evaluation. Will they cover all the bases? We don't know yet, because, you know, we're going through this for the first time, basically. Okay, we've had 2-stage calls where we know the results from stage 1, and we know who's going through to stage 2, but that's based on a very short stage 1 proposal. You know, I think by the end of the year we'll be in a much better position to know, you know, how the evaluators are dealing with the evaluation process, what kind of a feedback we're getting from them, what are the lessons that can be learned from the first set of calls. At the moment, we're not in a position to do that because we haven't seen an evaluation through from start to finish. You know.
It's basically, you know, we've submitted some calls in the past for FP7 which fall in the intersection with, say, institution and traffic.
Yes.
And sometimes the experts who are on the review panels, they tend to be either, depending on the project, they tend to be from one area. Just wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that has changed from FP7 into Horizon, because in FP7, as I said, you know, we had ICT for transport in the ICT thematic area in the ICT work program. So, you know, it was primarily ICT experts that were being used for the evaluation. Now ICT for transport doesn't exist in ICT anymore, really. It's in the transport work program. So, but it's still, you know, those topics still come under the remit of DG Connect. So I think it'll be a mix of ICT experts plus transport experts is what's going to be used, I would expect. But again, until we get to a stage where we've had a full set of evaluation results and we see the types of comments that are being made, you know, I think some of the early indications that we're getting is that, particularly for the innovation actions, a lot of people are missing the mark with that, because they're putting in kind of a traditional research proposal for an innovation action, and that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's starting at the stage where you already have your lab prototype, and you're taking it from there and bringing it through the next levels. Anyway, I just wanted to point to this particular site just as an example of some of the ones that are on the slides here. This is where you can search for various projects. Where is it down here? I can't get this on the screen here, can I? Sorry, what I'm looking here is different to what's up there. Can I scroll down through it and that? Yeah. Okay. So, you know, you can enter a search term, transport, whatever, okay? You can, if you know the acronym of a project, you can put it in here, okay? In under team, what I would suggest, the way I use this is that I look at it in terms of specific topics. So I go into, for example, FP7 ICT, and that will give you a list of all of the different topics that have cropped up in all of the FP7 ICT work programs from start of FP7 to the end, right? So you can see here we have the various activities, all the various topics that have come up. So again, you just go and pick one at random, whichever ones you're interested. And again, I have the table of contents from all of the FP7 ICT work programs as just a 2-page document. You can see, you can go back through those table of contents and see where was ICT for transport, where was ICT for energy efficiency, and so on. So if we just go into, just take digital libraries as an example, and then come down here and select search. So basically 12 projects were funded in that topic in that particular call, and it goes through each of the topics in each of the projects in turn, okay? Let's go back one. And again, maybe if we focus in on something transport related. ICT for cooperative systems 6.2. Let's go a bit more recent. That's quite old. 2009. Let's go 2011. Future networks, networking. I think it was 6 point something. I think was the low carbon, multimodal mobility and freight transport. 6.6. So this was in the 2011 work program. And we go down there and do a search. Now, the information up here in terms of the project information is static information. It's not updated. So you don't get results of the project or anything like that. Let's see if I recognize any of the names. Superhub, EcoDriver. What else have we? EcoNav, Modem, Emaps. Okay, let's just take the EcoNav one. So the type of information we get, we have the abstract here. Okay, the abstract for the project, the duration, so this was from October 2011, and it's still running. It's running up to September of this year. And then as we go down a bit further, the project details, the budget and so on, the coordinator, and each of the participants. Okay, so here we have Trinity involved in this one. And if we go in here, you'll get a contact name and so on. Now, sometimes the contact name is just an administrative contact. Other times it might be the actual researcher, but at least it's a link, you know. So by looking at, say, all the ICT for transport calls that we had in FP7, get the full list of the projects here. We can see who's been involved. And there's other types of information there as well. I mean, I have a spreadsheet there on my own laptop, all the individual participations across FP7 ICT. The other thing I have on it is a whole list of IBM participations. And it's public information. You know, there's no state secrets in that, you know. So I have a short Excel file there where I think there's about 98 or 99 IBM participations in FP7 ICT. And it shows you which part of IBM was involved. Was it Israel? Was it Switzerland? Was it Was it you guys here? Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm just bending or maybe you're just addressing it. But when we go beyond the work program descriptions and the documentation that is publicly available, are there any soft rules that the EU or you yourself would never configure to? Like, for example, in FP7 it used to be that you have to build a consortium around Central European countries and then some soft rules for local countries, or that it's only a good thing if you build more than 2 partners from the same country. That's one question.
Yeah.
The second question is, so I understand that IBM is considered, IBM Ireland is considered as a different legal entity than, for example, IBM Ireland.
Yes.
And in that sense, would it look good if these 2 sites participate in the same consortium?
Okay.
Because effectively, the actions they value, they're the same
Yep.
organization.
Yes. Okay. The minimum eligibility criteria: 3 independent partners, 3 different member states. You have to tick that box first. Okay. After that, you can start pulling in other Irish partners, for example, right? In terms of the coverage, geographic coverage, is it good to have an Eastern European country in there, for example? My experience has been that it makes no difference whatsoever. Okay. What the evaluators should be looking at is, are these the right people to do this particular project? Have they the capability? Have they the expertise? It doesn't really matter where they come from, as long as you tick the 3 boxes, the 3 countries side of it. I've seen proposals or projects which would have, say, 6 partners and 3 of them might be Irish, for example. Or, 3 of them might be German or whatever. It's not part of the evaluation process, okay, where they're from, as long as you have the 3 countries covered. What you do need to be careful of, I think, is more the perception of the evaluator. If the evaluator is looking at this project or this proposal and he sees 3 out of 6 partners from one particular country, what's he going to be thinking? Is there scope for him to be marking it down somewhere? I don't think there is, but again, it's the, you need to put yourself in his position or her position, and how are they going to feel if they see it? You're not writing the proposal for the commission, You're writing it for the 3 or 4 evaluators that are going to be marking you and scoring you. So it's the perception. I would argue, if you had 3 out of 6 from the one country, maybe it's creating a little bit of a picture that you don't want to create. But it shouldn't, okay? The bottom line is, if those 3 partners from the one country are capable and have the expertise to do the particular job, well, then that should be fine. In terms of IBM different divisions, obviously you have to have 3 independent partners to start with, but after that, you can bring in Haifa and you can bring in Switzerland if you want. And while I haven't seen it much with IBM, I've seen it a lot with groups like ST Micro, for example. There are groups that do that. There are organizations that do that. And particularly in the micro and nano electronics area, I've seen a lot of it. And again, it boils down to, look, does this particular partner have the expertise and the capability to do what it's supposed to do? And I think, there's a lot of benefit in looking for opportunities maybe where you could collaborate with Haifa or whoever.
I think Marco's question is the assessors judging and viewing which way Dublin is going.
Yeah, so what I was having in mind is, yes, as you say, that there's, for example, 2 different SMI or IBM sites will bring different skills. But still, the evaluator would like that because, for example, they may have different things in mind.
Yeah, but the evaluator was given fairly straight instructions about how they should evaluate this. You know, they're given a list of checks, and that's what they need to evaluate against. And to be honest, again, there's nothing formal to go against it. But again, it's the perception. And you know, if you get an evaluator with a certain train of thought that is not thinking the way you want them to be thinking, you know, maybe he's got a problem with IBM, for example, right? Not really. There is a redress procedure, okay? But the redress procedure is really only for the case where there might have been an administrative error. So a proposal was submitted for a transport topic and it accidentally ended up being evaluated against a health topic. So there was an obvious administrative error, that type of thing. I can't remember the latest stats we got in it. I mean, there have been quite a few requests for redress, but 99.99% of them are never upheld. You know, the vast majority of them are. In fact, I can't think of a single case that was. I know there are one or two, but I can't think of one offhand. It doesn't really happen. You know, again, it's the perception. And you know, if you present your argument in the right way and show, you know, that this group is here because this is what they have, this is their experience, this is what they bring to the party, and this group is here because, you know, it shouldn't matter. You know, if it's good enough, if you get your argument right, it'll fly. There are some examples of companies that don't go in as different divisions, right? Now, in reality, they do, but if you take SAP, for example, right? Everything SAP does shows up as SAP Germany for some reason. Even though I know for a fact that in some cases it's the guys up in Belfast are doing it. But that's the way they've structured. They're structured from a legal and administrative point of view. The normal way companies structure is like the way you guys are, that, you know, IBM Israel goes in as IBM Israel, IBM Ireland goes in as IBM Ireland. That's the norm. But SAP is the one exception I can give you as an example where everything shows up as SAP Germany. And again, Fraunhofer, if you look at the academic organizations, you know, Fraunhofer is a single institution, even though in reality it's huge and has a number of different entities. You know, it always shows up as a single entity. So again, it's the perception. You know, are you giving the evaluator the ammunition he needs in order to give you a good score? And you know, keep it short, keep it to the point. You know, and again, I know Sean McCarthy is coming in September to do a talk here. You know, give them the ammunition that they need. Yeah, I mean, we ran. The Idealist Consortium ran a workshop, well, I guess it's 3 or 4 years back at this stage, but it was basically an evaluators workshop where we brought together a group of evaluators from across Europe and went through the process with them and how they did it and, you know, so on. And we were talking about STREPs and integrated projects at the time, and, you know, for the most part, they were saying, you know, we give a proposal about 2 hours to evaluate it. Within the first 5 minutes, we know whether it's going down or whether it's going up. You know, they make their mind up, you know, in the first page, and they spend the rest of the time looking for reasons to shoot it down or to fund it. So, you know, you need to get your message across clearly and succinctly as soon as possible. The first couple of paragraphs. You know, it sounds easy, but it's, you know, it can be difficult at times. And now with the you know, with the page limits and that have been introduced, which personally I think is a good thing that there are page limits there, because I've seen integrated projects that were 300 and 400 pages, and, you know, I felt sorry for anyone that had to evaluate that, you know, because they're not going to read it. You know, they'll flick through it. They'll read the first couple of pages very, very seriously and carefully, and, you know, they'll read the first couple of pages of the implementation section and so on, but they're not going to go through 300 or 400 pages. You know, they'll make their mind up quickly, and then they'll spend the rest of the time looking for reasons to support their decision. So, the bottom line is you're writing your proposal for the evaluators, and that's the first fence you have to get over. And if they give you a good score, well and good, As I was saying, the guys in Switzerland and the guys in Haifa have been in the bulk of the projects that IBM have been involved in, and certainly there's an opportunity there to do a lot of collaboration with those guys, whether it's a case of going in with them or just getting introductions to relevant contacts from them. It's certainly worth building on. So this guy here should be able to make a few contacts. So do you want to have a look at another few websites, or do you want to just...
Remotely?
Is there anyone left remotely?
Hopefully.
As I mentioned, we have ICT Proposals Day coming up in October in Florence. Certainly worthwhile having one or two people go out to it and look for some opportunities. I think you're in 5 or 6 ongoing FP7 projects. So from that group of projects, I would be saying, look at the that you'd like to work with again. There's obviously going to be 1 or 2 partners in there that maybe you're not too pushed about working with again, but identify the partners you're happy with and develop those relationships, because they'll be the guys that will be able to pull you into proposals as well. You'd probably end up going in as partners. With a lot of the companies here in Ireland is they're happier going in as partners. Going in as a coordinator is just too much of an ask. In a lot of cases, they don't have the time. Let the academic partner do that. They have the time. We can give them a coordinator grant to pull the proposal together. And we can give them a travel grant to go out to the various events. So, get to know the academic groups here in Ireland first of all, and see what you can do with them, and then take it from there. Okay.